Hey guys, welcome to Making the Rounds. This is the 26th episode on my YouTube channel, but God knows what actual episode number it is, so I'm probably just gonna call it If It Ain't Broke, Don't Fix It, because we are back to doing the overlay, and hopefully we can forget I've gone through this a million times to kind of justify my own incompetence, but we're gonna go with this for a while now. Um, anyway, basically the first half of group stage, main group stage just finished, not to be confused with playing group stage. And there were quite a bit of, I guess most people think that this is kind of how it quote unquote should be, but for me, it just feels like a lot of teams are really close. I guess it's a feeling that I've almost never had halfway through group stage, right? Is that a bunch of teams in every single group just feel really close. So I think that this is there are a lot of things that can be said about the group format as a result of this, but that's not necessarily what we're going to be talking about since the show is literally called Making the Rounds and was originally conceptualized when we were both on Yahoo to talk about like which teams we think will make the next round. So obviously the applicability is very, very prevalent here. Actually, I wanted to call it Two Girls, One Show, which I can say now since we're not associated with Yahoo anymore. So, in order to break down these groups, we're going to go starting from Group B, which is the first group to play, going into Group D, or Group, oh my gosh, I'm going to screw this up no matter what. A, C, and then D, all right? Something to do with really bad acronyms that I can't think of at the moment. And we're just going to go ahead and talk about how we kind of think that these groups will play out and what teams we think will get out. So, first of all, Group B, this is the group that everyone claims they don't want to talk about, but really do. Just really deep down, because it's kind of like a train wreck where you can't look away. But J Team, they're in second. I think not many people foresaw that overall, at least on the power rankings that I had. Where did you have J Team going into this, Emily?
I did not have them making it out. I had Splyce making it out, which could still be a possibility, but it's looking less and less likely, just based on what has happened in the first part of the group, like mathematically. J Team, LMS is kind of like a huge hole in my knowledge, like in my League of Legends knowledge, so I typically rely on talking to other people who watch LMS. And their kind of rating of J Team was that they're not as good as like previous Flash Wolves teams, for example, that the LMS have sent, but that they are definitively the best team that the LMS is sending, and they're also their first seed, because sometimes the first seed won't be necessarily the strongest team in people's perception. The first inkling that I had that J Team could maybe perform well and get out of this group was actually thanks to scrim rumors from certain teams, and now obviously scrims should be taken like somewhat with a grain of salt, only because teams match up differently, they play differently against each other, especially at the tournament where teams are so close together. As you mentioned, you will have one team that like body, like, someone said, oh, we bodied J Team in scrims, and another team said, oh, J Team are actually really, really good. So it depends on who they play and how they match up. But I had heard that J Team were better than people had expected, I guess, going in. So I think the thing with J Team is that they have, like, specifically Fofo. I've really wanted to see him on the international stage for a while, because I knew that he was a really strong talent coming out of the LMS, and he's been impressive since I think the first time I saw him, because he went internationally to All Stars, and he performed well there with the LMS All Star team that made it against the LPL All Star team, and actually that entire series was something else. But Fofo was kind of a standout, so I've wanted to see him on the international stage. I think he's performed really well. I think this team is looking like they're pretty smart about what they want to do. And when they do mess up, it comes down to either like an execution error, or like, for example, their game against Gigabyte Marines. I know a lot of people were really critical of that game because we basically saw the same play like run in a loop for like 10 minutes or so.
Sure.
But it really came down to the point where the way that the teams matched up and the way the compositions matched up, that's kind of what had to happen. So even though J Team lost because they used Gangplank ulti on Baron instead of using it in the choke as they'd done the previous like 10 times. I don't know, like I like J Team, and in a group like this where we've seen other teams be incredibly volatile, I actually think they're looking like the most stable of the group, which is not something I expected to say, but that's what I've seen from them thus far, because FPX have had some really, like, I guess high highs and low lows, if you can say that. They're not playing any kind of out of the ordinary for FPX, but I know that means that they can be very volatile. Splyce have been very volatile in the way that we've kind of come to expect from them as well. And then Gigabyte Marines are also, I guess, a volatile team by nature of kind of the way that they play. So of all the teams, I think J Team are the most stable in terms of how they're going to play the game, and that bodes well in a group like this where, again, like we've seen a lot of variance, I guess, from the other three teams within like their specific play styles. It's a weird group, actually, because I don't even know if like variance is the right way to describe it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I feel like J Team, first of all, were the team that kind of scoped out Splyce's attempt to cheese, right? Which is very, I think going into this group, they, especially after seeing Loki's strategy, they see like the Scion and the Tristana immediately come out in draft, and they're saying things along the lines of, okay, they immediately think this will be a lane swap, and they are able to, from their old kind of tool or bag of tricks, go back to all the way to 2016 and pull out early level 1 lane swap wards, you know, to be able to react to and counter what's going on there. So I think that this kind of, like, every time analysts have said since the turret changes that lane swapping as a strategy only works because it's a cheese and because teams don't remember how to respond to it, because the reason why it doesn't happen that much anymore is because if you do know how to counter it, then obviously the team with the bot side should just win out. And then beyond that, like, I don't want to just give them credit too, but also you have to take a slight against Splyce, because I don't really understand going for the lane swap with Karthus, because I think especially if the enemy team has the ability to force on your lane instead, then you're going to be able to kind of delay the power of the Tristana lane as well. So I think it was really strange overall, because I feel like Splyce was showing just like kind of a lower understanding of their own strategy that they brought to the table than J Team had. So that was the really interesting moment for me. That was like the most condemning and damning of Splyce, and the best moment that kind of made G Team look like, oh, okay, this team is actually just better on almost every fundamental level. In terms of individual player performances, I also expected Humanoid to perform much better. I feel like Splyce, though, is the team that, you know, we watch a lot of LPL, both of us collectively, but I think that on the other side, Splyce is also the team where anyone coming in, it's like, oh, Europe has been a really strong, powerful region, and then the European analysts and fans will say, yeah, but not Splyce. Just pretend that Splyce are not here. You have the three-headed dragon meme with like the derpy dragon being Splyce. Yeah. So I think that this group kind of just got both of the awkward children of LPL and Europe somehow. So I think that that's that's part of what makes this group so weird to watch. So I think that, like, I guess I'm disappointed in Splyce, but also not the same way I am with FPX, right?
I mean, yeah, FPX are like, their performance has been, I would say, like slightly under my expectation, but not enough that it's like
Oh yeah.
Holy crap, FPX are just mental boom. Like, I mean, I know I wrote an entire article about this, but like I mean, we can skip over the comparisons to 2015 LGD, but I think the crux of the issue is that, like, I have no doubt that FPX, when they loaded up into that first game and they drafted what they did, like, that's exactly what they wanted to play. Like, that is not in any way out of the ordinary for what this team does. Like, I joke that you could take the nameplates off and I would know immediately, even before the champions are swapped, that that's an FPX draft, because they do this. Like, it's well within the parameters of FPX. And the weird thing, and the thing that I like really want people to understand about FPX is, amongst all the talk about Join B locking in weird champions and Gimgoon's Gangplank, and what else were like some of the narratives around FPX coming in, like
LWX, Kaisa, LWX in general.
Yeah. Again, also LWX didn't necessarily perform out of his parameters either, by the way, just so you know, guys. But I think the thing with FPX is that within their specific style, they're really, really good at playing that style. And when they're pushed, or when someone counters that in game through, you know, better gameplay and taking advantage of a lot of the mistakes that FPX do make, like on the regular, even when executing that style, I think it tends to make them look like really lost and directionless. And that's kind of that's the give and take when you have such a like set style of play. And so I'm not sure like why going into this they were like, I guess because they're Chinese first seed, people kind of assume like, oh, you know, they're unequivocally the best. Their record in regular season was really good, which is like an entire other discussion about
that's the immediate LPL bait.
Yeah.
EDG, immaculate record out in quarters. All right, let's go.
I mean, I think like it does have to be brought up that the LPL season is like incredibly arduous and long, like incredibly long. So it's not unheard of for teams to I think the most obvious like example, and this is probably a tangent that I shouldn't go on, but like the most obvious example is 2015 Snake, where people definitely knew how to draft against this team and they just refused to. So Snake had a really, really good regular season record, and then they got to playoffs and like
immediately got destroyed. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm not saying FPX are that, because I do think they are a better team than that, but it's something that you should consider when you're looking at FPX. And they showed some of these like stubborn drafting tendencies within their own style, even in the finals. Also in more obviously in their series against BLG, where I actually thought they were going to get eliminated after game 1. I was like, oh, it's another 0-3 result for FPX after this, because that's how like out of touch they seemed with the meta at the time, with the way that they drafted. And again, they draft to play this very particular style. I think you also saw like the best of FPX when like obviously they got a very OP draft, but when you see what Tion and Crisp can do on this team, it's really remarkable, right? Like they have some really remarkable talents on this team.
Their jungle and support, by the way, are the really remarkable talent, not the laners. I'm just throwing that out there.
So yeah, I think FPX are performing within the parameters, maybe a little bit worse. And I don't know if that's like stage jitters. They hopefully have gotten that out of their system especially after the last game. I feel like that should be a good confidence boost for them. But again, like nothing they've been doing on stage has been particularly out of the realm of possibility for FPX, and certainly anyone watching them throughout the LPL season would agree with that.
I guess when we're talking about LPL, there are definitely the marathon runner teams and the sprinter teams. And I think that most of the time, Doinby is just he wears his personality is so very like larger than life. You get this feeling that he's the kind of guy who wears his heart on his sleeve in a way, and then he just like puts it all out there in almost every game, right? And whatever that be that he's good at. For me, I think his laning individually isn't that great, but he really brings a lot to the table in terms of he takes every single timer, sometimes in the middle of team fights, sometimes in the middle of lane when he's supposed to be trading. He's very commanding. He brings, allegedly, based on all of his what all of his teammates say, is that he is very willing to help everyone with everything, no matter like kind of the time of day, things like that. So I think that all of those qualities, he puts a lot into, like he shows all of his cards in a way. So most of Doinby's teams have been sprinter based teams, and so it's really impressive then, and it's like really exciting to see that kind of team win the LPL. But at the same time, it also, you have to remember the context of the LPL being like the longest league season of any season, specifically because of the extra Demacia Cup tournaments, everything else that they take into account. Like last year, they also competed in the Asian Games, which a lot of teams did outside of LPL teams as well. But just those sorts of factors, teams like RNG will bench specific members, right? And so a lot of the times the teams that do better at Worlds do better at the end are more of the marathon running teams who have paced themselves a little bit more.
Splyce.
I think, like my problem with Splyce is that their issues are, and I wrote an article about this, but they're very like systemic throughout the game in terms of how they try to get vision at it as a team. It's very kind of one note, like we're all going to show on the map, and only after we all show on the map and we try to force an objective where they can flank on us can we get vision. This kind of like really awkward approach to setup that's really, really susceptible to when they're being kind of attacked by more creative teams. And then they also have just obviously like really good team fighting. They draft super late game, even in, I think almost the benefit or the strength of Splyce was how much scaling they drafted in a meta where their peers were not at all, right? So they were able to easily take advantages of teams that made just as many mid-game mistakes as they did, right? So I think that was kind of an advantage that they may not necessarily have against a team like J-Team that tends to, yes, make mid-game mistakes, but they also draft for late game, and they just seem to be slightly more clever about what they're doing.
Yeah, I think the game that Splyce probably want to have back is that FPX game.
Yeah.
Because that was just I'm not going to say it all comes down to that one play, but it kind of does in terms of that Baron setup. And then we have Gam, who I had no idea what to expect from Gam either coming into this, except for the fact that I knew that they played more of a standard style than people gave them credit for, because I think a lot of people tend to see them and then they're like, think of the Gigabyte Marines of 2017, and that's not this team whatsoever. Despite that, that being said, I think the team looks so much better with Slay in the game. And that has made a huge difference in their latest two games. So the one against...
much more decisive, right? So...
yeah, and he is, in my opinion, from, again, and I don't have a ton of tape on them, so I'm admittedly coming at this from an analytical disadvantage, but he looks to be like one of the better players on that team too, just in terms of the way he approaches the game. And like, I was really impressed with his Nautilus, right? Yeah, Nautilus against J-Team. Because I mean, Nautilus is kind of a champion where visually you can see how someone sets up and how someone approaches the game. And he looked really, really good in that game. The FPX game was a bit due to draft, to be quite honest, but then also I think they were just they had some, I don't want to say mechanical issues. I wish there was like a better way to say it, but like for example, the kill Jace matchup, Kaya probably should have been winning that late.
I mean, but in his defense though, I felt like Crisp was just like living there, so
Yeah,
he could not
he
push
ran
up
a
at
lot.
all. Like you can't play Jace versus that type of champion if you can't poke into all in, because if he ever went for kind of the all in route after the poke, then he would get countered by the Nautilus in a lot of the windows where he could have, and then Kale would just kind of slowly sustain up, right? So.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think of the teams as it stands now, I would say that the two teams that are getting out are probably FPX and J Team. I have no confidence in FPX and best of fives, actually. Like, I actually honestly thought going into this tournament, I'm pretty sure I said this elsewhere, maybe not on our show, but probably in an article or something, is I actually had more confidence in FPX in best of ones than I do in best of fives. They've, again, like to your point about the marathon and sprint, where FPX have been stopped in the past, or where Doingy teams have been stopped in the past, has been in these best of fives once teams figure out how to play against them and how to approach them in draft. And I don't see that going any differently in quarterfinals if they make it out.
Though I do think in an advantage that FPX kind of had here was in something that I haven't seen a lot of Doinby teams, which is just that they've always sort of prioritized what they're good at. But I think that a lot of what made them strong in the final was drafting in such a way that they could also draft around what Royal was good at, in particular forcing Ming to blind the champion for fear of facing the, oh my goodness, nothing is worse than Kaisa Nautilus. Nothing is worse in the context of LPL. So
yeah, it's true.
You guys have your Yumi Garens and your Sona Tom Kenches, but you know the LPL. They've got some Kaisa Nautilus.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Also, Tom Kench is a dive champion, not a defensive champion.
And Skarner is and if you're not ganking at level 3 on Skarner, you're doing something wrong. So these are the important things to take note from LPL. I do think that I almost want to just say Splyce anyway. I do think that this group will come so much down to draft, but I think J Team was able to adapt to what Splyce wanted to do. I think if Splyce had just tried to play out their comp normally, they still have like a pretty easy window to win anyway. But I felt that way about Loki, Demwon, and maybe you can make that argument less because obviously Demwon just reacted so poorly to the comp, and Loki's players are just like definitively worse than Damwon's players. So maybe you can argue that the cheese actually helped them a lot more in that situation, but this case I definitely feel like Splyce could have just played out the composition. So yeah, I guess we'll see what happens, but I'm willing to change my prediction to FPX J Team, even though I had J Team all the way at the bottom before.